Marketing still to this day is, often the most vulnerable part of the organization when times are lean or when economic
Right.
times are tough, when budgets get cut. So the challenge is, that we need to ensure that we're continually demonstrating the value of the work that we're doing and the team that we have on board.
Welcome to another episode of the Growth League podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Clark, and today I have the privilege of chatting with Mona Csada. She is the VP of Marketing at Virtual Gurus. Mona, we've tried a few times to make this happen, but today is the day. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, for those of us and listeners that have never heard of you and never heard of Virtual Gurus, give us a bit of an understanding. First, what's been your journey as a marketer and a marketing leader, and what brought you to Virtual Gurus? What attracted you to the posting?
Yeah, I have been in marketing in Calgary for quite some time, so I've certainly moved around a little bit. I started back many years ago, at the Air Miles Reward Program. Air Miles has a big office here, or a regional office here in Calgary, working with retailers primarily who were leveraging, that as a loyalty program. And I've, jumped around a little bit in terms of some verticals, post-secondary education, technology. I've spent some time in ad agencies as well. And, I think that's, somewhat been intentional, somewhat unintentional in
Yeah.
terms of always looking for sort of new and different ways or different sectors or organizations where I could maybe get some new experience. Maybe you could call me fickle that way, but
No.
sort of really have enjoyed over the course of my career dipping my toe in the water in different industries and different types of organizations. The decision to come over to Virtual Gurus was made during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
I know a lot of people made career shifts during that time. And I did spend a lot of time, in the early stages of the pandemic, thinking about what I really wanted to do next. And what really drew me here was the social mission, wanting to do something where I was really excited about what the organization might contribute to society. And so at Virtual Gurus, it's a virtual assistant service, subscription-based service for organizations who need some help on the administrative side of the house, but maybe aren't ready to hire a full-time person
Right.
or don't want to hire a full-time person. And so on a fractional basis, depending on the number of hours they need, we can match them up with really skilled, talented virtual assistants who can work with them on a fractional basis. And the social mission piece of the organization is those virtual assistants that we look to recruit into our talent pool are mostly from what we call traditionally underrepresented communities.
Okay.
So whether that's LGBTQ plus communities, people of color, Indigenous folks, people in remote communities, anyone who might otherwise, have a more difficult time finding meaningful work.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so our founder is Indigenous and part of the LGBTQ community, and she started it because she was struggling to find work herself, and realized that there was a sort of an untapped need here to create
Yeah.
something, around that. And so
Isn't
that
that
mission
fun?
is very central.
Well, that's fantastic when a service that, could be just provided exactly as it shows up, how it can be intertwined into something greater and better. And I'd imagine, well, you said it, that was one of the leading reasons that attracted you there. Because as businesses, we have opportunity to do more than just provide the service that we provide, right? Or sell the product we sell.
Mm.
So among the different stops in your professional marketing career, has there always been something like that, like something additionally that drew you outside of just the core product and service, or is this a new experience for you?
Yeah, I'd say not always, but the older I get, or I got, the more that factored in for sure. In the early stages of my career, I was really just looking to get experience and sort of try to keep moving, up the ladder, so to speak. And it's really, I'd say maybe in the last 6 or 7 years that's been more of a focus for me. I will say that, I think a lot of the younger generations coming up now have that as a focus from the get-go. And I love that about them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So as a marketing leader, you've probably heard me ask this question before, but when you come to the job, when you show up to work, when you just show up in general, what do you claim to be your superpowers as a marketing leader and a marketer? Putting you on the spot a little bit, but what do you feel really confident in terms of, like, this is the weapon that I wield because I feel comfortable with it and it adds value? And what would others say about you in terms of, man, that is her superpower?
Yeah, I did actually spend some time thinking about this one because I figured you were going to ask it, but
Right off the bat.
yeah, I know you sort of get philosophical here, but I think it's really about building trust with both people who are on my own team, as well as other groups and other colleagues across organizations, and and outside partners as well. And so just I try to be as honest and transparent as possible, and deliver on commitments, and even with my team, making sure that credit is given where it's due, letting people sort of bask in the glory a bit, not trying to own that for myself. And that's something that maybe earlier in my career I wasn't as good at, because it's we all want to try to advance ourselves, but there's so many other people who also are trying to do the same thing. And I'm getting a lot better at it, I would say, but it's always been a focus for me to try to have as much transparency and sort of honesty and trust within my team as possible.
Well, that's it's not easy for everyone, and if that is missed, then nothing else really matters, does it? Like, it's kind of hard. It's an uphill battle. But folks feeling, I guess, overused term, but folks feeling safe in their workplace because they can trust their leader. I mean, what that does is it opens up all the colors of that person and all the angles and compartments of it. Whereas in situations where that's not the case, you really are getting a fraction of that person, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
What is currently something that you think ought to be celebrated? Something that your team has been responsible for, maybe an initiative, a campaign, an uncovering of sorts. What is something that you'd like to celebrate on behalf of the team?
Interesting. I think maybe in general, my current team, I only have 3 people on my team besides myself. And sometimes you don't even realize until someone new comes into the organization and sort of says to you, hey, this is impressive, just how much we've actually accomplished with such a small team. And part of the reason, or part of the reason we've been able to do that is just getting creative about how we actually I would say reinforce our own internal bandwidth. As a service, we have virtual assistants that we match with organizations, and so we sometimes use our own assistant pool ourselves to kind of supplement our team for projects here and there when we need extra support. But also just the fact that everyone on the team is here because they believe in the social mission means that we're just all passionate and committed. And it's not like we're putting in any sort of crazy amount of hours, but we're so excited about what we're doing that we're everyone's giving 100%. And our company has grown exponentially over the last couple of years. And it's even not just my team, but the whole team at Virtual Gurus. Everyone's giving 100%, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly something to celebrate. I think when you guys are when any organization or team is heads down doing the thing, sometimes you don't know what the external validation exposes for you things that like, oh wow, we did that, or we are about that. We
Yeah.
didn't. So that, I mean, that's fantastic, right?
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, and what I meant was we just recently had a new senior leader join the team, and he mentioned that he was surprised at how small our team was, given everything that he's seen from an external perspective, and since joining. So that
That's
was really
fantastic.
gratifying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's as a marketing leader, as a marketer, it's not always roses and sunshine. What is one big challenge that you and your team are faced with right now that you're either have just recently overcome or you're right in the midst of it trying to figure it out, but you're excited to work on it together as a team? What's the problem?
Yeah, I would say there's a new product launch coming up, and we are, yeah, right in the middle of figuring out, there's going to be a couple of phases to it, what we call an MVP, or minimum
Yeah.
viable product, which will be a smaller test phase before we launch in a bigger way. And we're really struggling to figure out how we resource that appropriately. Um, you know, from the marketing side, and how much support we can give to it versus sort of the main, without distracting us too much from our main objective
Right.
of driving revenue for the main business. So yeah, it's kind of struggling through a few different scenarios right now, and what are the tools that we could bring on board to help us with that.
Yeah.
And trying to sort of keep it lean.
Right.
So
Well, that's the thing. Like,
yeah.
I mean, most marketing teams that I talk to of leaders, they use the term small and mighty, and when you have small and mighty teams, um, the biggest thing that will kill the progress is kind of that random acts of marketing thing, that chasing shiny objects, that not being really
Yeah.
intentional about, uh, just prioritization. And so I could imagine that that you go through that a lot, but it seems as though based on, yeah, at least from the external perspective in terms of what Virtual Gurus has been doing in the market and its growth, seem to have figured out at least some of that equation. So
Yeah, and then but the challenge is sometimes you even reach the limits of what you thought.
what do you
when
mean?
when you are that small and mighty team, we're pretty much at capacity, right? So how do we, yeah, how
Right,
do we,
right. If this, then at the expense of what
yeah,
type
yeah.
thing.
So what? Yeah, what are the trade-offs? That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
always the struggle.
that's
Yeah.
the what's your favorite part about being a marketing leader, and then conversely, what's the part that scares you the most?
I think my favorite part would be just the combination of creativity and business acumen that you need, and that you kind of get to exercise, and how you get to sort of marry those two things together, right?
Right.
And depending on the organization and your role within it, um, you get more or less of both of those sides of the equation. But yeah, love that. And what scares me the most? Well, marketing still to this day is often the most vulnerable part of the organization when times are lean, or when economic
Right.
times are tough, when budgets get cut. So the challenge is, that we need to ensure that we're continually demonstrating the value of the work that we're doing and the team that we have on board.
Yeah.
And especially as a leader, that's something that's crucial. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, and in my other world, as a provider of marketing services, I'm on a lifelong crusade of exemplifying marketing as an investment center, not a cost center, to
Yes.
be cut. But you shouldn't just get given that right or that opportunity. It's your requirement to fulfill the business case and to demonstrate, like you said, that intersection between art and business. And
Mhm.
so thanks for waving that flag as well, because you can come join the crusade.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how what integration of marketing looks like internally for you guys, and what role do you play in terms of facilitating that integration, whether it be collaboration with other departments, other stakeholders, clear communication of what are we trying to do and why. That's a challenge for a lot of marketing leaders and marketing folks. What's been your playbook on that?
Yeah, I think, it's basically adaptability and flexibility. And being in an organization where I am now, that's in scale up mode, our structure has changed multiple times in 2 years. And so, yeah, just sort of being open to and ready to adapt and pivot as things change.
Right.
I think I've had probably 5 bosses in 2 years. So, it's yeah, keeping an open mind, being ready to sort of pivot, but whether it's in terms of C-suite and finance, it does go back to that piece we were just talking about in terms of demonstrating the value, right? And making sure they're aware of this is the resources we have, this is what we're doing with them, here's the impact that we can demonstrate, and those things are easier to do these days now with all of the various tools and analytics and integrations that we have at our fingertips, right? So certainly no excuse for that. But the other really important one in our organization is sales, for me, and trying to maintain like a really close connection with that team, because we depend, our work depends, we depend on each other for our success. And sales has such a direct line into prospects and which organizations are buying and which ones aren't. It's really important to listen to them and hear what they're saying and use that to inform, what we're doing, how we're communicating our service, who we're targeting, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Do you have any example you can pull on as it relates to narrowing that gap between sales and marketing? Because, everyone talks about this in terms of part of their job is to integrate with sales, make it not sales over here, marketing over here. But is there anything, whether it's like a regular cadence or some specific documentation that you review together, like what has worked for you and what do you guys do for that?
Yeah, I'd say we have gotten better lately at the regular cadence, at not only leader to leader level but full team, right? So making sure that my team is talking to their counterparts on the sales team, and I wouldn't say it's it's a little bit more formalized at the leadership level and a little bit more organic at the team level, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any particular
that you can share. Of course, I'm sure you guys have your unique sort of intimate cadences, but I like that having integration and alignment at the leadership level is one thing, but unless that filters down into some form of a semblance of ways of working between the rest of the team, then probably not going to happen, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this won't sound like anything new, but even just making sure that my team is listening in on sales calls once in a while, right? Those kinds of things, those can be super insightful. Yeah.
Maybe simple, but so often overlooked, right? It's like if you're trying to figure out where the well is in terms of the richest information to then construct marketing systems, that's where it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just think that, intentionally or not, just the fact that you brought up the concept of sales team integration is critical, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of marketing leaders, and maybe you agree, but marketing leaders forget what we're here to do. Like we're not here to make fancy brochures and PowerPoint presentations. We're here to drive a top line at some point, right? So
yeah. I guess the other one, while we're on the topic, that I should mention is we have a client success team too. So, whether you want to call it customer service, client success, or account management. And that's just as important. So same type of alignment, both at leadership and, at the full team level. Because, we've been talking a little bit lately about churn. Every organization has some churn. And so looking at the different reasons and sort of dissecting that, often what it comes down to, a customer leaves because there's misalignment somewhere, whether it's, the sales message that they heard and then the reality of the service that's being delivered, maybe not quite matching. And, it's understandable that sales teams are going to be really enthusiastic about about what we can deliver on, but it's also important to be realistic about that and ensure that we're not over promising and under delivering, right? So
Right. It's a important balance.
yeah.
So Mona, without getting into any specifics as it relates to numbers, I'm curious about how you approach the art of budgeting. So, you look at an upcoming period of time, a fiscal or a quarter, and you have a blank piece of paper in front of you. Again, without going into details, of course, of numbers, but like how do you get your mind right for a budgeting exercise? What's been your learned ways of approaching that activity?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I've learned more recently that's crucial and really helpful is just kind of knowing your internal metrics and cost structure. So, what does it cost us to acquire a customer fully loaded, right? Whether that includes not just the cost that you're spending on media for ads, but how much time is my team spending, on those things? And then what's the sales and customer service infrastructure to bring a client on, and how do you sort of allocate that? So working with the finance team to understand those metrics, because you have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about, okay, what is best practice in terms of percent of revenue, or how much we should spend on acquiring a customer compared to how much it costs to bring them in. So that's a really helpful just ground framework or foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just remembering when you're looking at ROI of what you're doing, and to help you sort of figure out what's working, what's not, to try to count all of those kind of fully loaded, including the time that your team spends. That was a big one. I could use an example like events. I used to be a proponent of, let's participate in these big events which support both lead generation and awareness in a big way. They're cost effective because they're bringing in this many leads, and this is how much it cost us to participate in the event. But then when you actually put in the cost of all the team's time, not just marketing, but sales too, and not just the day of the event, but all the planning that went into it, it's a different story. So that needs to factor in it as well. And also ensuring that you're looking at ROI using actual revenue, not just how many leads did you drive, but you've got to get that lead quality factored into, right? So if you drove 100 leads and only 2 of them closed, those were not great quality leads. Right. So
yeah, no, that's I guess over time you establish your own sort of decision making matrix and criteria, and then you get faster at it because you learn what works, what doesn't. But hey, we're all learning too at the same time. So
yeah, for sure.
Going back to an earlier point, as it relates to team capacity, we talked about you can't do everything. You got to kind of like balance the what happens, what priority is. What has been your and your team's official or unofficial, documented or undocumented decision-making criteria for, well, 2 good things? Where do we invest our time and effort? You obviously mentioned which has the best impact on leads and stuff like that, but is there anything maybe under the surface that goes into handling that constant balancing act you need to do with a lean team?
Yeah, I guess there's sort of the short game versus long game consideration as well. And so the temptation can be to because of the pressure on whatever it is, monthly, quarterly numbers, focus 100% on the short game. But if you don't spend time, and by long game I mean things like maybe more awareness level brand building activities, if you don't spend time on that, your short game is not going to be as effective, right? Because it's not going to have that. You won't have any sort of brand recognition or credibility to help, from a conversion perspective. So you need to be continuing to plant some of those seeds at the awareness and brand building level to ensure that your lead gen activities will continue to perform. So yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure. And one of the things I do regularly is sort of try to look out and see what other organizations are doing.
Right.
What's worked, what hasn't. There's some traditional benchmarks in terms of, well, how much should you spend on brand versus demand gen, but those don't necessarily always work for every organization at any given time, right? So yeah, and then also just realizing when and how can we bring in some reinforcements in a cost-effective way, hopefully, whether it's finding an agency or a freelancer who can help us for a short burst. Sometimes that can work well as well.
On that topic, in experiences where you have brought in an external partner, what have you done in the past, or what have you learned that if you do it this way, it results in a really good marriage, and if you don't, then it results in a poor experience for everyone? Like, certainly you've probably established your own playbook for that topic over time. How do you think about facilitating great partnerships?
Well, I think, yeah, there's a few things that are basic that probably won't be nothing new to anybody in terms of, just making sure you're clear about scope and, doing good briefs and those kinds of things, garbage in, garbage out, that sort of thing. But I think also just team fit is sort of like fit with culture and with style. Those are important things as well, and things that you might not think of. Like, you might be looking more at, well, what's their brag roster? What amazing things have they done for other organizations? And that's important. But there also has to be some sort of fit in terms of style and culture and
Totally, because they're part of the team for a season, or longer term, shorter term, depending. Yeah, no, that's a good point. For you guys and your team, you have different KPIs across different channels and this, that, and the other. But like, is there anything that you can point to where, when all the dust settles and you look at your 2 or 3 colleagues on the marketing team, you can say, job well done? Like, what is the North Star as it relates to an indicator of we are fulfilling our mandate or we are not fulfilling our mandate?
Well, the one sort of single high-level KPI that we have adopted this year is what we call marketing generated revenue, and that is identifying how many deals are closing because of the various different activities that we've launched, right? So it's about that primarily, but there's also, and I haven't quite figured out how to measure this yet, but something around brand credibility and reputation, right? That also needs to be there.
More than just someone I was talking to referenced Virtual Guru, something more.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one, but I think to your marketing or revenue generated through marketing, it's interesting, because it sounds like in that case you've actually created a KPI for yourselves, whereas a lot of folks would just say overall revenue as a function of investment in both hard expenses and in employees. But I think that you're acknowledging that not all revenue is coming through marketing. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and that is a debate, because how do you draw that line, right?
Totally. And what else, Mona, like, why would you draw that line? I think a lot of marketing leaders, none of my podcast guests, of course, but some of them are a little bit more scarcity mindset, and it's like, well, we don't want to intentionally draw a line between overall revenue and marketing generated revenue. What if that exposes us as being, whatever? But I think that it kind of speaks to what you were talking about, being a trust filled leader, but also like if your superpower is establishing trust, I'm assuming you're not working for an organization that you don't trust the people, right? So
Right. Exactly. Yes, it goes both ways for sure.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So you have to be, it does take a little bit of courage, I guess, to make yourself vulnerable to that
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
that's great. That's where the real impact happens, right? And no, that's cool. So when you I don't know if you do this often, but when you kind of close your eyes and think about virtual gurus over the next year, 2 years, what are some of the things that come into clarity for you as it relates to fulfillment of mission, new land marked, new things achieved? Whether it happens or not, I'm not going to hold you to it, Mona, but just like what are some of the things in an ideal state that come into clarity for you?
Mm. Um, I think that it's that brand recognition piece.
Mm,
Um, when you're lean and scaling, it is difficult to dedicate time and resources to building that. But I think we're fortunate at Virtual Gurus to have this amazing origin story, for the organization and for the founder. And so, we've had some success with PR and, getting media coverage and people being excited about that story.
yeah,
So really leaning into that and leveraging it as much as we can,
yeah,
to sort of build that brand recognition piece
yeah.
and yeah.
Virtual gurus, no doubt, services across the continent, right? Or like,
Yeah, across North America, for sure, Canada and
okay,
the US. And yeah, I mean, we have our sights, ultimately set on expanding beyond that too.
okay.
So, setting ourselves up for that, is definitely, on the list.
What are some of the characteristics of an organization that would represent, or a team that would represent just the perfect fit for the problems you solve?
Oh, in terms of sort
Like
of bringing more
who would
people
be
into
a who would be a perfect client of virtual gurus, and why?
mm, you know what? Any organization who, is growing or changing, rapidly.
Hmm.
I think the whole fractional talent, solution is a good fit from that perspective. But where we really see the most amazing, I think, longevity and sort of satisfied, relationships with clients is when they also align with that social mission and have similar values.
Right.
Because then they get just as excited about creating these opportunities for the communities that we're,
Right.
trying to uplift as well.
Totally. Because like at some point,
Yeah.
fractional admin service is fractional admin service is fractional admin service. But if there's something
Yeah.
additional to that, um,
Mhm.
um, that makes sense, obviously. Um, Man, a half an hour flies by. We could keep chatting about this, but I'm going to leave you with one
Yeah.
question, which is, you've been a number of different places, served a number of different industries, been on client side, agency side. Um, at this point in your career, and with this exciting new sort of opportunity going forward with virtual gurus, like what do you do to kind of keep yourself sharp or inspired or motivated as a marketing leader or a marketer?
Well, I think that's a really important question because, it's funny. I was just watching, I think it was an NFL athlete talk about the fact that, what kept you relevant last year and maybe it made you a superstar last year is now just kind of table stakes and a
Right.
basic expectation, so how do you continue to, develop yourself? And it's really just a focus on it.
Mm,
And yeah, seizing any opportunity you can, I guess, um, to learn new things.
yeah.
And I think one of the things the pandemic sort of put into focus for me was the value of getting out into the community and talking to other people who are in the fields, and just exchanging ideas in a more organic way.
Mm,
It's not always about signing up for XYZ course or getting whatever badge
totally.
certification. Sure, you want to be doing those kinds of things, but for me, I think, sometimes the biggest sort of light bulb moments happen when I'm talking to somebody new, or someone, a colleague from another organization,
Yeah.
and we start comparing notes, right?
Yeah. Being on a podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Listening to other people on podcasts.
I actually will leave you with one more because I meant to ask you this at the beginning, but outside of the team that you're building and supporting, and outside of virtual gurus, like what fills your cup? Who is Mona? Like, is she a skier? Is she a golfer? Like,
Well, I'm actually, dabbling a lot in dance these days.
geez.
It started years ago as just a way to trick myself into cardio.
Right? That
um,
makes sense.
yeah, and I've tried lots of different dance forms and classes, but I've again, just coming out of the pandemic, just joined a Bollywood dance group
Come
that
on,
is
that's
actually,
awesome.
it's so cool. It's focused on performance. And so, we do these live performances multiple times a year. And so not only is it great exercise, but it's a community
Totally.
of amazing people. And, obviously I'm not of South Asian descent, but
What?
but was very welcomed into the community, and it's a very diverse group, not only in terms of ethnicity but age,
Yeah.
and the whole performance thing was really intimidating at first, but it's helped me with things like this, right? It's out of the comfort, it was out of the comfort zone, but
Yeah.
made me realize, just push yourself a little bit and you'll be amazed at what you can do, right?
I mean, you could apply that to lots of different areas of life. So that's
For
pretty
sure.
cool. As it
Yeah.
relates to dance studios, my involvement is bringing a 4-year-old in a tutu every Sunday. So
Love it.
outside of that, I'm not the fleetest of foot. So, but anyway, everyone, my guest, Mona Csada, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your perspective and experience.
Thanks, Caleb. It was great talking with you.